All right, everybody, good afternoon. Just by show of hands, how many of you guys were in this morning's public sector breakfast at 6:30 a.m.? See Rebecca over there. Well, thank you. And first off, I would like to thank Teresa Carlson for her executive briefing this morning. It was very good, and also just a thank you to the AWS public sector team in general. We work with them almost on a daily basis, and it's just a wonderful experience all around, and it's a great partnership. So my name is Sean Enright, and at Cloudnexa, I'm VP and GM of public sector, which includes federal, state, local, cities, institutions, nonprofits, associations, education, and of course, universities, such as University of Minnesota. And we support enterprise, mid-market, and small businesses with cloud management as a service. So what does that really mean? We were, if not the first, one of the very first AWS partners in 2008, and same as a reseller in 2010. Our expertise in terms of architecting solutions and managing their environments, customers' environments, goes a long way back. And as part of that management, to actually help our team better manage those environments, we developed our VNOC platform, which is unique in a few different ways. It does not replace and compete with AWS's management console. It complements it. It has all the AWS native capabilities pulled in, and then we extend that through a lot of automation, and provides a lot of capabilities in the areas of monitoring, compliance, SLA management, detailed reporting and chargebacks, and we could configure it and set it up for large enterprises such as universities and large organizations, as well as down to the smallest organizations. So it could be really tailored, and most importantly, it could be tailored pretty quickly, because we support an efficient onboarding process. In terms of timing to get onboarded and starting to consume AWS services, as well as cost efficient. And what makes us unique is our OpEx model in parallel with AWS. So our pricing is very simple. It's a % on top of AWS spend. So in theory, if you have a test dev environment, you put everything in a stop state, after 3 months, you don't pay us. We're incentivized to provide our customers value on an ongoing basis. So we're giving demos, 5-minute demos over at a booth, so come check us out. And that brings us to today. And we recently kicked off a university-wide agreement to provide cloud services to University of Minnesota. And we believe this is the first nationwide CSP agreement that's university-wide. I know there's a lot of work in different pockets at universities, but we're real excited about this opportunity and what we're doing with University of Minnesota. And so I'd like to introduce Kamal Badr. He's an assistant director at the College of Liberal Arts. And he's responsible for infrastructure services and technology, but he was instrumental in the procurement effort in getting this going at the university. So I think he's going to provide some valuable insights into the procurement process and what they went through internally. I'll kind of chime in at the end to kind of give our perspective. But he worked very closely with the CTO of the university, Patton Fast, I'm sorry. So with that, Kamal, take it away.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I know you are missing something else totally exciting and awesome by being here. I really appreciate you showing up here. I want to start with a story about last year. I was here last year for the first team event, and it was great. I'm hoping this one will be even better this year. But it was great to hear all the cool things that people were doing then, all the wonderful stuff that AWS had going. And it was energizing to listen to people talk and talk to each other to think of things we could be doing. But talking to my public sector brethren, other people from public universities, from governments, the one thing that we kept talking about was not the cool things we could do with AWS, but it was how we could not use AWS. And what do you think that was about? Do you have any idea why we could not use AWS? We had all sorts of issues: security, contracts, liability. We were worried about all sorts of things, and it kind of froze us in place. And it was kind of depressing to see all these cool things that we couldn't do. And we all were thinking of different ways of doing it, and some of us are already successful. Michigan and Harvard, I heard yesterday, have something along the lines of what we are doing, not quite similar. What we now have, after a year, we just finished this up, so it took us almost a year, a contract university-wide that allows all our users, independent of any central oversight, to consume AWS services through Cloudnexa and do it without worrying about any security, any privacy issues, any contract issues. So we allowed our users to basically consume cloud services as if they would consume office supplies. And we think that's really exciting. And today I'm going to talk about how we accomplished that. And hopefully it's going to be an interesting journey for you guys to listen to and maybe get some lessons out of. So the plan of the talk is I'm going to start with a brief overview of the university, what we do, how we do it. I'll talk about why we want to get to the cloud, what exactly is it that we want to do there. And then I'll talk about our process. As a big public institution, we had to follow a ton of rules about procurement and purchasing. I'll talk about how we went about it. Then I'll tell you how it worked out and what we learned. That we made some mistakes. We made some good calls and bad calls, and I want to talk about those. And then I'll talk about what's next. What is it that we're actually going to do now that we have this somewhat unique setup for our institution. And Sean is going to help me out with at the last part by providing Cloudnexa's view into our process and how it worked out for them. So, the University of Minnesota. We are a large public institution. We have 5 campuses. The maroon M's are the location of our campuses in the state of Minnesota. And the gold dots and squares show our presence in the state otherwise, extension offices and research and outreach centers. As you can see, we are a very, very big part of the institution, of the state. And we work a lot with our citizens and with our local government. The university was founded in 1851, so it's kind of an old institution. We have 69,000 students total. It's one of the largest university systems in the country. And we have about 20,000 staff, which makes us the largest employer in the state of Minnesota. And we have a budget of about $3.3 billion. I'm throwing these numbers out there so that you guys can get a sense of how we have basically, we are a great institution, but we have probably all the issues that will come with large institutions. We are also big into research. Last year, our federal research funding was more than $700 million. That places us, I think, in the top 20 of all research funding in the country. So it's a big deal. It's a big part of who we are. Next, I want to tell you about IT at TU, how we do IT. And this is going to be familiar to most people who are coming from similar institutions. We have a lot of IT staff. Last count, it is more than 1,100 people. And these people do anything from building robots for Department of Defense projects to running PeopleSoft for our ERP systems so that people can get paychecks. So it's a very wide variety of work happening in different places. And it happens in a very, very distributed way. Again, as of this count, we have 228 different budget lines that pay for IT staff. So it's not really in any way aligned with each other. We just do things in very different ways. So we have tiny colleges or tiny departments that have 1 or 2 IT staff that just sit around and do whatever it is that their department needs. That could be building robots, fixing machines, fixing printers, helping people with faxing, whatever it is. There are some larger departments that have a couple IT staff that could be doing something more than just a little bits and pieces there. There are some even larger ones that can have 5 to 10 people, and there are even larger ones that have more than 50 people. I'm for one of those. The College of Liberal Arts has about 50 full-time IT staff, and they are just one of those dots. Then we have a whole different area, the non-academic side, where we do student support, finance, and HR, and those are generally much more consolidated. There is no small unit doing their own HR. Nobody pays their own people with their own checks. That's a central function. And then we have central IT, which is as big as any, the combination of those dots. So the way we usually look at this is 1/3 of the spending happens in academic units, 1/3 in non-academic units, and 1/3 in IT. But again, it's very distributed, and there is really no tradition or culture of things happening in a aligned and centralized way. But we need to get there. We have a significant budget problem, like most higher education institutions, and one of the priorities for our president is to make sure that we actually are spending money wisely. And one of the things that we are doing right now, as a matter of fact, is consolidating help desk. We have 73 help desks, and within about a year, we're supposed to go down to 1, which is going to be interesting. But it's a goal. And 73 help desks are definitely not healthy. 1 might not be healthy either, but we'll see how that works out. So alignment is what we call that, and we're trying to make sure that even if we are not reporting to the same person in the same way, we want to make sure that the decisions that we are taking and the strategies that we are building are actually aligning with each other instead of going at cross purposes. Another thing about IT at the institution is that we have a lot of private data. We have an hospital, we have research, we have students, we have international data. In my unit, we actually have responsibility for data that the French government and Chinese government actually have a say over. They tell us what regulations we have to abide by in order to keep that data in our institution. So every kind of data known to regulator, we will have it in somewhere, which has the implication, of course, that we are very, very careful. I mean, we are a large institution with a lot of history. That makes us careful to begin with, but this kind of potential liability makes us much more careful than you would think otherwise. And that has been a big problem in the past. We tried to cover everything with the same security and with the same level of attention, pretend that there was no difference between somebody's research data from a weather station and patient information from a clinical trial. Now, in the last 18 months, we have been going through a process of risk readjustment that is trying to make sure that we are applying the same approach to risk everywhere. We want to make sure that the people who are doing sensitive research are paying attention to what they are supposed to be doing, but we also want to make sure that people who don't need security don't overdo security. And this is actually a key piece to our journey to the cloud, because I'm sure as all of you are aware, people are worried about putting their stuff in the cloud for security reasons, and we were able to tell people that they don't need to worry about their security if they are not doing anything on a particular list, and they can actually relax about a little bit. So why do they want to go to the cloud? Beyond the obvious reasons. I mean, you're all here for a cloud conference. I don't need to tell you why it's exciting to go to the cloud and what can be done there. So, well, I want to highlight 2 points. One of them is that our users are already there. 3-4 years ago, when people were still consuming email on premises and there wasn't a lot of mobile apps and things were kind of nascent in this area, we didn't really need to worry about this too much. But right now, every single one of our users can go get an email account in 2 minutes, a Dropbox account in maybe a little bit more than that, and put everything they want on the cloud. They don't have to ask us. They don't have to tell us. They can just do it. Is it right? Probably not. We would rather they talk to us and understood the risk and all that. But the important thing is that they can do it now. And if we pretend that they can't, if we pretend that we can still control what they are doing, then they're going to leave us behind. And we can afford to have that. We need to make sure that we are with them in their own journey to the cloud and to do all these services that are out there. And that means we need to understand how we can do infrastructure in the cloud, how we can do services in the cloud to make sure our users are getting what they need in a better and more efficient way. The second point is, I call this climbing up the value chain. Amazon and others have figured out how to run servers. They run, I don't know how many at this point. I'm sure they know. If they're adding $7 billion worth of business every day, they probably have no idea how many servers they have. But we have far less. And we could try to establish a service model with tools and everything that enable us to do business like Amazon, but it would take us a lot of money and time. And it would be kind of silly to try to replicate that just to prove that we are just as cool. And instead, I would like us to leverage their expertise and what they are doing so that we can go focus our efforts somewhere else. In an institution like ours, IT can be a great partner to research, to instruction, to administration. But if we are worried about how we are going to stack the next server or stand up next application locally, we don't really have time for that. We only have time to worry about our infrastructure and how we are doing things as they are. So going to the cloud, leveraging these services by people who are doing it better than us, or better than we can possibly even dream of, will allow us to do better things and more productive things with our time. So now I'm going to tell you our process story. It's going to be really exciting. So last September, we had our what I'm calling our first use case. Obviously, people have been using the cloud already, but this was the first big bang that we had that rose to the attention of our central organizations. And this was from a research group that was running an application on 20 servers. They had 20 virtual servers, and it was kind of heavy application. And they went from research to production/business in the space of a couple months. And they realized that if they grew in the way they were predicting, they would need 1,000 servers in 2 years. And they came to us and said, can we get 1,000 servers? And all we could say was, no, of course we can't. What are you talking about? They said, well, we have these contracts we're signing. We're committing to doing this. And you guys have to give us this stuff. And we went, oh my God. And we basically have to stop doing everything else and start thinking about this. And obviously, this is not the only example. It's not the, it's the most outrageous one we have, but there's a lot more where this came from. So this came to my unit, and I went to our CTO, Patton Fast, with an F, Sean, and told him that we had this particular use case. And we also had a couple more that were slightly less drastic, but still obvious candidates for the cloud. And when we talked about it, his decision was almost immediate. He said, we have to do this on the cloud. We can't do it ourselves. We can't stand up more data center space. We can't buy more servers. I mean, yes, we can do all these things, but it's really not the right thing to do at this point. And then we decided to do a request for proposals, an RFP, a public bid for cloud services. And right from the beginning, what we wanted to do was not to actually say, we're going to buy cloud services for central IT and then resell that, or charge people for their usage internally, or tell people they can only do A but not B and C. We wanted to say, this is open, you can do anything you want, you can do it any which way you want, and you are on the hook for all your own bills. We don't want to keep track of you, we don't want to measure what you are doing or how you are doing it. It's going to be entirely on you. We'll just give you kind of enough rope to hang yourselves. It's a good rope, it's entertaining rope, but it's not going to be our problem what you are doing with it. So that decision being made, we called in our purchasing people, the people who would actually write this RFP, and we talked to them, and we didn't do any, we did our own research. When you are doing these things, you can't just go out and ask people to tell you what you need to know. You have to do a little bit of homework yourself. And we did it ourselves. We didn't engage a consultant. We didn't go and talk to too many people, for better or worse. And we started drafting the RFP a month later. And our purchasing people have been, they were great throughout this process. But the greatest thing from the beginning was they didn't come to us and say, this is not like buying laptops. You can't do this. Or this is not like buying software. We can't really make it work. They said, OK, this is new. We have no idea, but let's figure it out together. They were very open to the whole idea, and they helped us make it work. A month later, reInvent happened. I came here. I was, again, like I said at the beginning, I was very excited. And when I came back, when I went back home, we published the RFP, I think, the week after reInvent was done. We waited for 2 months for the vendors to respond. We got a fairly healthy response rate. It was 1 dozen vendors who responded. And for an RFP that is not particularly aimed, it was a great result. We expected not that many people. Some of those that we expected didn't show up. Some of, we got some unexpected responses, but it was all good. In April, we invited them on campus. Between January and April, we went through a first round of elimination. We eliminated some vendors who were completely unaware of what we were asking for. One of them proposed private cloud instead of public cloud. They didn't even read what we were writing. They didn't make it. So we got several vendors in. They came on site. We invited them on site. This is part of our standard process. And we asked them to go through a script. We made sure that they were talking about the same thing and that we could understand what they were saying. And here, our purchasing people had a great idea. They said, all this stuff, everybody's selling different things. Some charge by hour, some charge by virtual machines. This is all crazy. We can't score this. We can't understand what they are doing. They said, instead, how about you guys come up with scenarios that explain a given business case and give them details so that they can respond to that scenario. Tell us what they can do and how much it would cost. That really made the whole thing, honestly. Because without that, we would have had the hardest time trying to distinguish between vendor X's pricing model, the Cloudnexa's pricing model, and somebody else's. But that way, they not only had to tell us what they thought they could do for us, which allowed us to actually understand whether they were any good in the first place, they also had to give us the pricing. And that was a hugely beneficial part of this process that allowed us to both score them and understand better what they can actually accomplish. So I heavily recommend doing that. A month later, we did the awards. And then somehow it took us 4 months to actually sign a contract and get it in place. And then a month later, we did a campus kickoff event. That was great. I'm going to ask Sean to talk about that when it's his turn. And now we have the contract in place. So, and we think it worked great. Our users are very happy. Our purchasing people are very happy because they don't have to manage a whole billing and then rebilling cycle where they have to track people down and everything. And we have a genuinely excited dozens of people already who are talking to Cloudnexa, who are trying to figure out how they are going to do things. And they are the most wonderful, craziest things that you can imagine. It's not we'll put our ERP on the cloud. It's not we are going to do some teaching stuff on the cloud. It's anything and everything. So from our perspective, why did it work? The first thing is that we had our executive sponsorship. This wasn't a small department wants to do something by themselves and figure it out without talking to anybody. It wasn't a central IT by itself thing either. We had broad participation. The broad participation from colleges, from central services, from the CIO's office, enabled us to actually make this something real rather than some random thing that is a little pet project of somebody's. Again, I can't emphasize enough the importance of support from our legal and purchasing staff. They didn't get what we were trying to do, but they listened. They told us what wouldn't work, what would work, and they were willing to learn and experience with us. Scenarios, I'm going to keep hitting that. It was critical to do that because nobody really knows what they are selling or how they are selling it, honestly, and they can put it on an RFP with a pricing matrix and then have you make sense of it. Of course, having the right respondents really helped. I really cannot speak highly enough of Cloudnexa in that context. They came in and they really didn't sell us the stuff that we didn't want. They didn't tell us that we didn't know what we were talking about. They didn't tell us that their product was the only thing that we could use. They were very understanding. They respectful of our needs, and they came and communicated their value very well. And with that, I'm going to turn over to Sean to talk about what worked for Cloudnexa. Oh, I guess we don't need this.
So what I wanted to do with this slide, just illustrate and just map the efforts that Kamal and his group did on the procurement and BNP, the bid and proposal side of things, and map it to how that translated to us. And to start off, the first one, their structured RFP process and what they did up front enabled us to communicate our value proposition. And just anecdotally, I see this time time and time again, federal, state, local, across the board, across public sector, is when you don't have a very structured and focused RFP, it makes it very difficult. It's very challenging to communicate that value proposition. And that ties very closely to the next item, which is, I just called it cloud-oriented pricing, and Kamal kind of talked about it. This is not buying a Dell laptop. This is not buying software. This is an OpEx model. It's different. And it's new to a lot of contracting officers and program directors out there. The fact that they did their homework, they understood that this was different. This is cloud-based services. It enabled us to communicate our pricing and why we're unique and to be competitive and to compete. And then, of course, that on-site presentation is absolutely key. I mean, we always want to get on-site to engage the customer directly, engage the people that we're going to be working with directly, to open that dialogue and really get at the heart of what they're trying to do. And that was just clear from when we first stepped on campus. Their leadership was engaged. Pat and Fast was there through every single one of the sessions, which was incredible. It's oftentimes you see them kind of swoop in and say hello and then fly back out, but he was with us every step of the way, and it was there's a lot of energy behind it. And in terms of post-award, we're kind of still in that post-award phase because it's a very process-driven onboarding process. And these are things that we're actually actively working on right now. The more, there's a lot of structure around the onboarding and engaging their security team, the networking team, and making sure all the protocols and sort of those guardrails that we all want and that fit their organization are in place. Because there is a lot of demand, and there's a lot of different projects and a lot of interest.
Yep. Okay, good. So some lessons learned, some things that we are glad we did, and some things we should have done maybe differently. The first thing that really worked for us is that we build a vision based on our culture. Our culture is distributed. We cannot go and charge people money for services they consumed or for things they bought. They just do it themselves. That has been true for decades now. And if we try to say we're going to do a central purchasing of this and then charge everybody indirectly, it would have not worked out. We appreciated that, thankfully, and we went accordingly. I talked to a couple of other institutions who have done this recently, and they are very comfortable with that model, doing everything centrally and charging people. They think they can do it because they have that culture. But for us, it's simply impossible to go through that, and I think it's going to really work out better for us. Doing your homework. I've been through a lot of RFP processes where we sort of kind of knew what we were getting, but we didn't really understand what the vendors were selling. In this case, it would have been a disaster. Thankfully, we had a good cross-section of people from the institution who had not only gotten some exposure to cloud services and thought about them and understood how their service, how their area would benefit from them, but were willing to actually learn instead of just sitting there and getting the vendors to talk to them without understanding what they were saying. Simplify. It's the urge to ask complicated questions to convey the complexity of your organization and your work is overwhelming. We love doing that. We love telling vendors how complicated and difficult we are, and then it becomes a very interesting conversation. We didn't do much of that in this one. We just asked, okay, here are some things you can do for us. Tell us how we would do it. And that was it. Asking the right questions. Don't ask vendors in a cloud proposal how many hard drives they have or what speed they are. I'm saying this because some people apparently do, because we had some responses that actually put those in there. I know, for example, that a vendor is using 700 RPM drives in their cloud. It was there. They felt like they had to put that out there, and I'm guessing it's because people asked for that. It's not the best idea. It just clouds your judgment, and it makes scoring very hard. and ask people questions. I mean, RFPs tend to get out of hand. Ours had 200 questions. They could really have used a lot less than that. And being patient. It takes a long time, especially if your organization is anything like ours. This is going to be new to many people. And you need to educate them. You need to help them along and make sure that they're actually following you and understanding what you are doing, rather than being forced to deal with whatever disaster you can cook up. And here's Sean.
All right. So from our perspective, lessons learned, we thought it was pretty successful. We won. But I'd rather talk about some trends that we see across public sector, not just universities, but I think some things that apply in general. And one is, and this is just a wide trend, it shouldn't be a shocker to anybody here, but we're seeing a lot of, in RFPs and procurements that are out there, decoupling from infrastructure, from app dev. A lot of the time, especially in the federal space, it's just the RFPs are bundling them together. So we're just seeing a lot of that decoupling, which is good. It's a positive step. The pre-RFP planning and research, we've talked about this a few times, and in terms of the homework that's done by Kamal and his group is absolutely a best practice. And it's very clear to us when we're reading RFPs across public sector that organization did their homework. And it's through engaging your team internally to do the homework and not subcontracting it out. And you really got to take the time to do at least a little bit on your own. And something that Tom Soderson, I don't know if, for those of you that were there this morning for the public sector breakfast, when he was talking about the cloud commodity board, I don't know if anybody remembers that, but that rang so true and was really part of the point that I want to make here. That's a very formalized structure, to create a board around everything, to manage the cloud and to engage all the stakeholders. But what Kamal's group did was exactly that. It wasn't as formalized as a cloud board per se, but he was engaging the legal team, the procurement team, the security and networking group, and everybody that's involved to get them on board. And it wasn't without challenges, but they worked through it, and it's reflected in what they did. So in terms of, we talked about this, pricing structures that fit the cloud. A couple different notes on this. It's just avoid on the pricing side. If you're an organization that's going to structure an RFP, you definitely want to avoid catalogs of physical infrastructure, so it forces respondents to have to map that to cloud, and that's always a tightrope that, as a respondent, we have to walk, and we're always at risk for being non-compliant because of it's just very difficult to respond to, and obviously things like firm fixed price and are just very difficult. And that goes to just, understanding how to structure the RFP and the pricing. So, next. So in terms of replicating successful models and best practices, I hope that you can glean from today some of the best practices from this particular case. The scenarios and how Kamal's group used scenarios to create an apples-to-apples comparison for pricing, that is definitely something to leverage going forward. Other types of techniques would be to set ceilings and certain thresholds, define what organizations can use the contract or agreement, CSP agreements, cloud service provider agreements, provide a lot of flexibility, and it's incumbent upon you to define how that should fit into your organization. So I think the last point would be just to balance the standards approach with flexibility. So we all hear about ITAR compliance, and in the education world, there's FERPA compliance, and GovCloud in particular is ITAR compliant. But there's in a lot of the RFPs that we get on the federal side, especially, they automatically think that they need GovCloud. I mean, GovCloud adoption is through the roof. I think the number is up 300%. But it may not be necessary because because Amazon has FedRAMP compliance across all of the regions and FISMA moderate compliance. So there's an educational process there, and you want to balance. You want to make sure that you're focusing on your specific compliance needs and just not grabbing stuff that's out there because it's out there and throwing it in the RFP. So you want to balance that with the to maintain some flexibility.
Okay. Thanks, Sean. So now that we are done with the exhilarating part of our process conversation, I want to tell you guys briefly what we are actually going to do with all this work that we did. The most important thing that we are focusing on right now is to do pilot projects. We don't want to do a big bang. We're not going to move our ERP to the cloud. We're not going to start providing all services on the cloud. We're kind of too early for that. But what we would like to do is to do these pilots with researchers of any area. We want to make sure that given the breadth and depth of the tools that we have with AWS, we want to make sure that we get as many people as possible involved in this process so that they can try out cool things and they can show some successes in small scale, not necessarily in huge amounts, so that we can make sure that everybody in the institution understands what the value here could be. Disaster recovery is an obvious one. We want to make sure that we can stand up services in the cloud when our local data center is not available. And the last one is the most important one. And this morning's public sector talk actually stole my thunder. They repeated this a couple of times, the failing fast concept. And it's critical to us. The way we do things, right now, I think if you have to buy a server to meet a certain need, it would take us about 6 weeks to cut the purchase order, get it in, rack it up, install it, and get it going. And that's not because we are stupid. That's not because we are incompetent. It's just that things taking that long. And if you want to try something out and it takes you that long to buy a physical server or about 2 weeks to get a virtual machine set up in the exact way you want, you're not going to experiment because it's expensive. If it takes you 80 hours of somebody's time, just think of the lowest paid sysadmin you have and imagine 80 hours of that time. That's not cheap. And if every experiment costs you that much or something like that, it's not going to work. This with Amazon, with the way we can provision things, with the way we can partner with Cloudnexa and get things done, we can tell somebody that their idea that is not going to work within days, weeks, instead of months or years. And if it doesn't work, we're not on the hook for a piece of hardware or lots of sunk time or anything. We just unplug it and stop paying for it. That's going to be key for us. What's next? Our biggest priority is getting more providers. I mean, AWS is great. It's wonderful. We love them. But having diversity is important. We don't just buy laptops from one company. We have 2 or 3 that we hold on contract and make sure that we have options. And it's going to be interesting to see how this evolves. We have done in the last year, in addition to working with Cloudnexa and Amazon, we also have done 2 other things that are kind of related. We now have unlimited use enterprise licenses for GitHub. That's that little cat/octopus for those of you who don't know them. GitHub is a very cool version management, version control and software management tool. And we also have the contract with Upscode Chef. They are a server management tool that augments AWS and other infrastructure really well. And with those, we can basically start doing infrastructure in a completely different way. Using Chef and Amazon, we can deploy servers in minutes. Using GitHub, we can share those recipes and those best practices with each other as code instead of having to talk to each other or having to pass paper around. And this way, we'll be able to do a lot of cool things that we simply could not have been able to do before. And we have, like I said, we have these site-wide contracts, so we don't have to worry about only certain people being able to use those things and not others, and only certain people knowing about them and not others. And the most important thing is that we have a huge amount of talented people who have now the right tools and the right approach to doing things, and we're hoping that they will accomplish great things for us as we move forward. We have several of them here today in this room. We have several in the conference. If you see them, ask them what they're going to do. I'm sure they're going to come up with really cool things. So thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. And, oh, I'm supposed to say, give us feedback. Please, feedback. Go ahead.